Hi, everybody. We're live. It's Nadine Gilkison again, and I'm happy to show you that I have a guest today. His name is Marcus Painter. Hi, Marcus.
Hey.
I'm going to let Marcus give himself an intro. I will tell you that he does a position very similar to mine, but I'll let him get into that. Go ahead, Marcus.
All right. My name is Marcus Painter, and I'm the coordinator of digital learning at Twin Lakes School Corporation in Monticello, Indiana. If you're an Indiana person, Monticello is about 20 minutes north of Purdue University. If you're an Indiana person and of a certain age, then you might recognize the little catchy tune from Indiana Beach. There's more than corn in Indiana. Yeah, so that's where I work. I grew up in Indianapolis, actually. Nadine doesn't work far from where I grew up. I grew up on the east side of Indianapolis. I went to Warren Central.
Oh, okay.
And my dad actually just recently retired, and he was the veterinarian at Wanamaker Animal Hospital there in that lovely little town of Wanamaker.
And Wanamaker is part of Franklin Township, where I'm at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm familiar with that neck of the woods. But yeah, so I do a lot of this sort of thing, sort of the tech integration and coaching stuff. But of course, as you guys know, as teachers and leaders in your buildings, everybody wears lots of hats. So this is the thing I'm passionate about. Less passionate about test coordinating, but it is another thing that I get to do occasionally. And then one of my passions outside of my sort of 9 to 5 is being a part of the Canvas Casters podcast, which talks about using Canvas as an LMS and talks about teacher leadership and ed tech and all sorts of cool stuff like that with my buddy Eddie Small. So
yes, and half of our district uses Canvas, and so I have been telling our teachers that they need to subscribe to your podcast because you guys are giving all kinds of awesome ideas about how to use Canvas in the classroom. Cool. If you're joining us, if you want to put in your name, where you are, and what you teach, you can throw that in the comments. The nice part is that since I'm not by myself, I can manage all of the comments coming in. So if you have a question for Marcus as he gets going, feel free to pop it in there, and I'll be taking a look at the chat if you have anything. All right. I'll let Marcus go ahead and get started then.
Awesome. All right. So let me just start by saying I just love Google Forms. I think that in our district, and Nadine talked about Franklin Central Schools having, half of your student population using Canvas. We're kind of the same way on a much smaller scale. We have our kindergarten through 5th grade students in our district use Google Classroom, and then our middle school and our high school use Canvas.
That's exactly us.
Awesome. Perfect. And so, it's kind of tricky there. It's like, what grade do you transition? I've worked in districts where we were Canvas K through 12. But in our case, I get the opportunity to work in both. And for me, Google Classroom is great, and Google Forms is just a great tool to leverage in both. And so I wanted to take some time to talk about forms and what we can do to sort of build out content that hits on a few of the sort of the important stuff that we would do in a brick and mortar setting in a conventional learning environment that we frankly I'm having a hard time remembering what that's like. But
right.
But yeah, so I think that this is a great tool to leverage when you are working in a space where we are sort of these days and for the foreseeable future. So I tried to come up with a catchy title, and so I went with These Forms Are on Fire, in hopes that, of course, everyone would start singing the song, This Girl Is on Fire. But then here's the thing about forms for me is when I build a Google form and use it with students, or even in a lot of cases with teachers, that's exactly how I feel right there. Look what I have created. I'm so excited. And because when we do them well, they're very efficient and effective sort of modules of learning. So that's what we're going to get into talking about today. So we'll talk a little bit about the why, which we've kind of already done a little bit. We'll talk about the how in terms of, I'm going to just kind of build and demo and show some things that I think are maybe underutilized in Google Forms. And then we'll talk about some next steps. So I always like to, hopefully sort of preface the session with, what's this going to, what are the takeaways? Hopefully there's something that you can pull from the next few minutes here this afternoon and apply to something that you have for the remainder of the school year. Or if you're like me, maybe you're already thinking about the summer. I get that. But at some point you'll come back and you'll say, all right, I got to start thinking ahead. And so hopefully today you can take away leveling up your skill set with Google Forms, whether you've been, I always say if you've been treading water. To me, treading water with a digital tool is you can get in there and you can survive, but you're not doing anything formal necessarily. You're not doing anything too crazy. And frankly, we're just trying to survive. And so maybe you're at that point and you're like, I want to learn something to get to where I'm a little bit stronger. And maybe if you're pretty strong in Google Forms, then maybe you pull something from today that levels you up into, feeling like you're a real Google Forms guru. Hopefully I've got some new ideas about Google Forms in your class. Hopefully you can think more deliberately about personalized learning within a Google form, which is sort of a hot button topic. But I think that it beyond the obvious, personalizing learning for your students means that you, the teacher, need to be directly involved in that, your personality. We want to be more engaging and provide great content within that confined Google Forms space. And then lastly, Google Forms is more than a survey or more than an assessment tool. And so hopefully I'll be able to sort of express that today. So let's build. Let's go. All right. Can you see these forms are on fire Google form?
Yes.
All right. I guess the chuckle might be because of that face there. So this is just sort of a model Google form that I built out. And I just want to talk about some of the things that I think are either absolutely vital when doing distance learning with a Google form, or things that I think are kind of underutilized. I started out using Google Forms for bell ringers and exit tickets. And when I was teaching high school English, I would use a Google form as a starter or bell ringer. And I would come in and truthfully, and I've told this story hundreds of times probably, Google Forms both ruined me and fixed me all at the same time in terms of how I taught. Because I always assumed prior to Google Forms that I knew what the kids needed to know. So I'm teaching AP English and we were reading Les Miserables. And I know that I've read the book dozens of times. I know exactly what the last 60 pages what content should be gleaned from that. And so I would come into class and I would have my agenda of what we were going to talk about as we reviewed the reading. Then Google Forms came along and I started using forms and I started doing bell ringers and 2 or 3 questions. And it immediately ruined my self-confidence because I was able then to get that immediate feedback. And so I'd throw 2 or 3 questions into a form, share that with them, in my case, on Canvas. And as I'm taking attendance and getting class started, boom, I start seeing pie charts of responses and bar graphs and so forth. And I immediately realized that I needed to go a different route with our discussion. And that was the case for a good long time until I got better at utilizing the technology to make sure that what we were doing in class was effective and impactful. So One of the things that I start off with here, and our teachers at Twin Lakes do this, is we're really big on screencasting, regardless of age group. I have been beating the drum for delivering instructions using a screencast, and as I end up saying, trim the fat of the text-based instructions. We're not talking about instruction quite yet, but just the instructions, what are we going to accomplish today? I found myself going through and typing out these very complex instructions, step-by-steps, outline format in some cases, and it got complicated, and it was hard work for me as the teacher, and it was really difficult for the students to do all that reading. And so what I believe works much better, more efficient for everyone, is a video. And so at Twin Lakes, part of the requirement on an e-learning day, like an inclement weather e-learning day, and then certainly as we've seen now with our current situation, teachers are using screencasts as their introduction to the week, as their instructions for the content for the day, however they sort of formulate it. But within the form, it's really easy to add a video to a Google form. And so I opened up a Google form and I titled it. And then right out of the gate here, I went ahead and clicked on the button that says add video. And so when you do that, it wants you to go to YouTube. And you can either search at YouTube or you can click on URL and copy paste your URL. So what a good number of teachers in my district do is they record their screencast. For us, we use Loom. This is sort of the GIF argument, but screencast version. So I'm a Loom user. I love Loom. Maybe use Screencastify or Screencast-O-Matic, or maybe you have some other tool that you use. Really doesn't matter.
In our district, we just said we gave them all the options.
Yeah. And I think it's honestly, and I'm sure I have some teachers that probably use other tools. I just did training on Loom because it was just my personal preference. But regardless of what tool you use to screencast, they are going to allow you to download that video. And so when you click on one of these, in this case, you have the ability to download it. So then you download, you go to YouTube, and you upload. And that really just gets the video into a spot where you've got a YouTube link that you can then put into your Google form. And so that's what I did. I downloaded that file, I uploaded it to YouTube, and it basically, once it did all its processing and I, made it public and so forth, it gives me a link that I can copy and paste. So I did that here. And so in the case of this Google form, that's what I'm starting with. I'm not starting with a whole bunch of typed direction. I'm giving them a video that they can watch and they can pause. And so I always say, you watch, you pause, you do. And that frankly goes for all learners.
Right.
Watch, you pause, you do. And so that's been really helpful in instructions as well as instruction, right? And so, if you look at any grade level, giving the student the learner, the ability to be in the driver's seat and they're in control of the pacing is really important. And that's frankly what's probably going to be the case here. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a lot of stuff real fast, but this video will be on YouTube. And so tomorrow you can go back and you can watch, you can pause, and you can do. So I love that aspect. I think all of us are just more efficient and effective communicators when speaking. And imagine trying to do all that in text form. So that's, and you certainly can add, I could certainly sort of add a text section here and put a bunch of text instruction in addition to, and I actually, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Put some text there as well. So then you're kind of hitting on multiple learning strengths. But just to dump a bunch of text is just painful for you, and it's painful for kids. And it's rough.
I did want to ask you, Marcus, since you guys use Canvas, like, I didn't know if teachers would say, oh, well, I use Canvas, so I don't need to use Google Forms. So what do you say to that? A lot of our teachers at the middle and high school still use Google Forms. Certainly you could accomplish similar things in other ways in Canvas because it is so multifaceted. But I've found that many of my teachers will go ahead and just take that Google form and then pop the link into an announcement or assignment. Some of my more power users, my techie folks, will get into the embedding. Okay.
Which is nice. They'll take the embed code from the form and they'll put it into an assignment in Canvas so that it's embedded right there in the rich content editor. So
cool.
That's
good to know, because that way people see that it can be used in both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why people like us in districts where we're sort of these hybrid setups, I'll talk to my K-5 teachers and I'll say, you want to use a Google form because it's easy. You get a link and you pop it in your Google Classroom. Done. Right. And then I'll turn over then your Canvas instance, and here's how you can make that happen. So sort of university tools. The longer the video, the more likely you're going to have an issue.
There we go. I was losing there for a minute.
Processing. Speak of the devil. I'm talking about download and upload speeds, and then you're losing the irony. So, chunk those videos as well. Make them short. Keep them short. To me, and I'm sure can be some debate, but I like to keep all videos 5 minutes and under. And even 5 minutes is probably pushing it. And if that means you've got multiple videos, you got multiple videos.
And I agree with that, because I'll tell people, even when using Screencastify, they'll be like, oh, well, I only get 5 minutes for the free version. I'm like, honestly, do you really need to go over 5 minutes?
Right. I mean, and truthfully, that's the, we talk about meeting kids where they are and the YouTube generation and all that stuff. I feel like if I'm trying to pretend to be a kid, I feel like if I look at a video and it says the time on that video is 3 minutes and 40 seconds, I'm like, boom, done. I can handle that. If I look at a video and it says it's 17 minutes, I'm less excited about tackling that.
Right.
And so I feel like if you make them manageable, that speaks to me, because I'm the guy who reads the book. And then when I get to the end of the chapter, I immediately flip ahead to look at the next chapter to decide if I can handle what I'm about to start.
Right.
Am I ready to tackle this next chapter? And I know that avid readers don't do that probably, but I do. And so I feel like it's the same mentality. Chunk it and keep it small. And if that means you have multiples, so be it. But it'll be easier to manage for the learner. It'll be easier to manage in terms of like tech issues or potential issues if they're short and sweet. Okay, let me refer to my notes. All right, so I built a form here, and I was trying to pick something that would sort of just be sort of like anyone could look at what you've seen here and then apply it to your content. So I went ahead and just decided on Indiana history. And the first question here, again, can you just build a Google form and have it be nothing but text? Of course you can. But I do think that it's super helpful to have visuals for our visual learners.
Yes.
So go ahead and put video in, and then go ahead and put images in. And so in this case, this question is an image-based question. Identify the Indiana historical figure below, and then you've got the picture. So is this Duchess Nadine of Hyperdocs? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I can rule that one out as a question. Is this Sir Henry Bubbykins III? You guys don't know who that is. That is one of our, rest in peace, one of our dachshund puppies that we had, Carrie and I had when we were first married, and he was a chubby little guy, so that was his sort of nickname. Is it Booth Parkington? Is it William Henry Harrison? So it's not that people don't know that you can use an image as the question itself. I put the text here, but I didn't even really need to.
Right.
But again, I've got both levels. This speaks to me. This also speaks to working better with English language learners.
Yes.
Which my wife is the English language learner coordinator for Tippecanoe School Corporation. So she always is on me about, well, but what about?
Yeah.
What about your language learners? And so I think right here is a great example of this is good for all learners, but it's also going to help teachers in the classroom better communicate, better work with, your level ones, your level twos that you might have in your classrooms.
Right.
So just use images. And even if the question isn't solely based on the image, you can include an image to assist and support.
Right.
So there's one. The second one is just flipping that, reversing that. Are you able to make a question and then have the answer choices be images? And again, you can see here, I've done that, but I've done both. I've added the text, but I've added images as well. And again, it's the same concept.
This has been a game changer for our primary teacher.
Yeah.
Once they added that ability to add the images, I had a teacher, a first grade teacher, that did that with like a phonics check, that she was able to then put in the images that would go with it. So like you said, anytime you can add the images, that really helps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, to me, I if I'm being completely, honest here, it didn't take long to build what's here so far. And it doesn't take but another click or two to get that image put right in there. So, I was able to go in, make my question, add my image, use the search right there within Google to make that happen. So I really do think that that's just helpful. And I just don't know that people use it as much as we could.
Right.
It's not that we don't know it's there. It's that we don't maybe realize it and implement it as much as we should.
Right.
The next part that I really like is, again, utilizing video. I had video before of my ugly mug given the instructions or instruction for that particular Google form. But here we've got a video that's pulled, from YouTube. And so I've got the video embedded, and then I've got questions based upon that video. Again, can we do this 100 different ways with 50 different digital tools? Yes, we can. So maybe you have another tool that you like when it comes to video and questions. But again, one of the big takeaways that I want you to get today is that you can build an entire module for a day within a Google form with instructions, instruction, and questions, and all of it can be in the standalone thing. And so here we've got a video. Kid would watch the video, and then there's a question, a couple of questions. And so in this case, this question is, I wanted to show this type of question because it's, again, is not a commonly used approach. I think when we're treading water with Google Forms, we're like, okay, I can make true and false and multiple choice questions. I can do like a linear question, like strongly disagree, strongly agree, that kind of stuff. Well, there's more to it. And so here I made a checkbox question and I put 6 different answers. But what I did differently here is I came down to the bottom here and I hit the 3 dots. And when you hit the 3 dots on one of these questions, you can see what's called response validation. And so I turned that on. Okay, so if I'll turn it off so you can see what it looks like. So there's nothing here. And then I come here and then I turn on response validation, and it added a little spot here. It's kind of hard, like you can miss it if you're not really looking at it. But I check marked response validation. And then it gives me some choices here with these check boxes. I can select at least, at most, or exactly. So imagine, and again, I told everybody how my questioning and my lecture, my discussion of novels was changed by forms. Think about this, right? So we're no longer just able to do multiple choice, one right answer. We can make some more complex questions here. So I can say select exactly, and then I can choose a number. And in this case, I put 3 because there are exactly 3 answers that are correct here. And so I'm able to make more complicated, more complex, higher level thinking sorts of questions within this tool, other than just true, false, multiple choice.
And I know when that option got released, that was a game changer, because as we know, several standardized tests will have that where the student has to have the multiple correct.
Yes.
That was great.
Yes. And classic Google move, always right there with the next needed element within all of the tools that they provide. And goodness, I wish we didn't have to think about standardized testing, but
right.
It really is really helpful.
You had a comment from someone that said that they like that this is almost like an Edpuzzle, in which I said to her, it is, but I like the fact that it is, but it isn't. Like you can have something mirror something like an Edpuzzle, but add so much more. Yes.
And that exactly speaks to the point of, can you accomplish what we're talking about today in other platforms? Sure. But if I'm speaking of my instance in my district, half my students and teachers are very, very Google centric because of using Google Classroom. And because of that, I feel like it makes a lot of sense to build within things that are familiar. Can I use Edpuzzle? Of course. Can I use 3 or 4 other platforms that are all over Twitter? Absolutely. But can I accomplish that same thing in an environment that looks familiar to kids and teachers? Yes, I can. And I can do that here with a form. Cool. But yeah, that's an excellent point. So the response validation type of question is really great there. And again, it just shows us that we can make some more rigorous, and I'm not wild about the word rigor, but we can make some more complex types of questions beyond just sort of what a lot of folks see a Google form to be. The next thing, and then I'll sort of zoom out here in a second, but is student feedback. And I was never great in the classroom when it came to getting student feedback on my approaches to instruction. I can certainly admit that. Now, actually, this past semester, I have been teaching an 8th grade technology class. And it's been my first time back into the classroom for about 4 years. And so I'm much better at it now. I've sort of learned, believe it or not, that you can teach an old dog new tricks. And I've definitely learned that the importance and the value of getting feedback from kids on a regular basis. And so I think it's even more important in a distance learning scenario that we're in now, to get that contact, to have some sort of running conversation. And so I added a section here called student feedback. And I added it because I wanted to be able to show the question type for a file upload. And so when you go to question, you make a new question, you've got all these question types. And so lots of people are familiar with short answer and paragraph and multiple choice. And we talked about checkboxes and a drop down. We get all those. Linear scale. But this file upload is one of those, secret, not so secret weapons within Google Forms. And so I typed a question, said, time to check in, upload a selfie expressing how you're feeling about the lesson so far. Because in my mind, again, if we're talking about a large module that we would be teaching, maybe this Google form is almost the whole day's worth of work or content. This can be a heat check, right? So the same way as you do the happy face, the frowny face, right. You do a green light or a yellow light or a red light. Some of you guys have like the give me a high five, give me a thumbs up, all those things. I'm just trying to do that in a digital space. And maybe it'll be kind of fun, right? So you add the file upload, and then it says that you can, I'll toggle it off for a second. It looks like this. Allow only specific file types. You can have it off, or you can turn it on, and then you can distinguish what you want. So maybe I'll say I will allow video, and I will allow an image. So they have the choice of doing a quick video with the webcam, or just a quick snapshot. Number of files, I'm just going to let them do the one. And then it does allow for a maximum file size. And certainly if I'm allowing video, I may up that slightly. And that might be a trial and error for some folks, just in terms of what will work and what won't. I can't imagine they need to record anything too long. But then they're able to upload that file. And so you would be able to go ahead and see those selfies, that kind of stuff of your kiddos. And again, I feel like that might be a little bit more engaging than not asking their input at all, not getting a heat check at all. You can do the same thing and do the multiple choice answers as the heat check elements you want. I've definitely done it with like red light, green light, yellow light as your multiple choices.
Cool.
And you say how you feel about it so far, and they click and choose that way.
And I've used this option whenever I talk to teachers about using choice boards, and they're like, well, but if I'm giving kids all these choices, how am I going to collect all of that work? And so this is a great outlet. I'll always say, well, use Google Forms, and then you're giving them a lot of leeway of how they can turn in that work.
Right. For sure. Yeah. And I'm talking about sort of just a progress or heat check sort of approach. But the same thing applies. I've used this for, if we're going to, again, zoom out to a completely, different application. I helped out at a former district with scholarship applications for seniors for getting scholarships to move into college or university. And they had to write an essay. So we used the Google form, and I built that out. Built out the Google form to have all of the typical scholarship info, the background info, the names, the addresses, the phone numbers, the parents, the contacts, the GPAs. But then they had to turn in that written element. And so sure enough, we just did file upload. We said, okay, make sure you upload the document. And it was really easy for the guidance department to manage those scholarships because they had, again, everything in one spot. And they were able to see all of the sort of demographic info. And then they also had those files right there, easy to access.
So you had a question. So you may want to demonstrate this. Someone said, when they post a file, how do you see it? And then this person said, I'm used to collecting form responses on the Google Sheet, which I don't know if you want to show like what that looks like on the back end.
Right. So I can tell you what it'll look like. So if you look at your responses, right, and if you are a person who's a spreadsheet person and you don't just want to look at the response tab, right, then you would do the create a spreadsheet. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I'll create. What you'll get is a link to their file that they've uploaded. So in this case, as it loads, in this case, you would get a link to the file that they uploaded in terms of the selfie. In the terms of the scholarship thing, there would be a big long Google link to the file that they shared. So
the nice part is that with the Google form, you're collecting not only the work that they've done, but it's kind of like that centralized location where you're asking them all these other questions and getting the file versus you just saying, here's a spreadsheet, add your link.
Right. Yes. And that's, again, and talking about being efficient, streamlined. This is as much for teachers as it is for students. My application is to have things kind of streamlined and in one spot.
We have another question. Someone just said, does it automatically change the sharing permissions for the student so the teacher can see it, or do you need to tell the student to make sure that they change their sharing permissions?
If it's in, it depends on the setting for your domain. So for example, like the default setting in our district is that anyone in Twin Lakes School Corporation can view. Default.
Okay.
And so in that case, if they upload that file from their drive into the form that way, then we're good. We can see it. If you had, for whatever reason, some need to have editing privileges, then you would need to tell them ahead of time. You're going to have to make your settings this way to submit that file. Generally speaking, I think most districts are probably keeping the sharing within the domain, within your school corporation as a view. I think that's the most common.
Yeah.
So as long as that's the setting that is default, then you'll be able to view that file. Assuming you're logged into your school
right
as well.
And definitely test it. I mean, try it out and then you'll know.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think that's probably something that, nerds like myself and Nadine, we spend as much time testing the thing we just built than probably we do building the thing because we're so worried about having all the links work and all the things do the proper things. So checking and double checking. The last thing I wanted to just point out in terms of the presentation of this is you may have noticed that I've got sections. So section 104 is the title and the instructions for this Google form. And so then after that section, it says, after section 1, continue to next section, but there's a drop down. So I have some choices. And so you've got options. Now for me, for this particular example, I just wanted to chunk content further. I just wanted to have students realize that they were really going through a, I hate to say rigid, but I am driving them down the yellow brick road here with this form. And so if I go to view this, you'll see what I'm talking about. And this is where I get into the last point I wanted to make today, which is Google Forms aren't just for surveys and assessment. They can be standalone learning modules. And so I think it becomes more apparent when you see it this way. So imagine this is the student view. So student gets the link, however they get it, whether it's in Google Classroom or in Canvas or whatever means you use, and they get this. And they can't scroll down. They cannot scroll down and see all the stuff because I've chunked this content. You must watch my instructions first. And so they have to watch it here. Then they're going to hit next. Now they're going to move on, right? Here's the question with the picture. Here's the question with the pictures as the answer choices. They can't proceed until they've completed those questions and they hit next. So, call me a control freak. But I love that I am now working them through the content, and I can now make this less about an assessment and more about a learning experience, because I can hit next here. They're going to get to the video question. Yes, I have to play nice here. They get to the video chunk. They've got the video, and I only let them see questions that are related to this video, which, you know, I know that might seem like duh, but, you know, I even say, watch the video below. The following 2 questions are based on the video. If I had this form completely without sections, there's bound to be a student who would get to the 3rd question and think it relates to the video.
Right.
Even though it may not, right? Because even though I said 2 questions, but what I've done is I've made it a section where they could not get confused about that particular element.
No, I love the way that you're talking about how this can have that layout where it looks like a module, where it's that, you know, that you're doing the learning that way. Also, I've tried to get better at too. I don't want students to have to scroll, like have that forever scroll. So adding those sections, I think that really helps a student so that they're not like, oh my gosh, look at how much that I've got. And also that progress bar, you know, when it adds the little progress bar, so that way they know at least I've worked through half of it or something.
Right. And that's a nice, I do like the progress bar, and I can show you that in a second here too. But yeah, just again, chunking through so that they're working through the content. And there could certainly be sections that have no questions. You know, there's a section that just has, you know, a link to something that they're going to read, or another video, or an image, or a map. And so you can have sort of the content delivery. Maybe you chime in and you put a video in a section that is just you bringing them up to speed on the next chunk of content, you know? Yeah. So I just think that the approach to a form, I think we can use it better overall. Right. It's kind of the overall, I guess, far reaching. But you mentioned the progress bar, the settings. So I come up to the gear. We know in Google, the gear is going to be the place to check. And I just spoke about how we double and triple check. The last thing I do before I send any form is to come up to the gear and really ponder everything and make sure I have it the way that I want. And so, you know, the collecting of email addresses may or may not be something that you do. I like doing that, because I like to force 8th graders to use their school Google account for school stuff.
Yes.
So I force them, because I collect email addresses, and then because frankly, we still need a quote unquote paper trail in this world. I like to go ahead and give response receipts always. That's just me. Because who knows? You know, how many times has a student come up and said, well, I turned this in, but you said I didn't turn it in. Right. Well, now we've got a paper trail. I can say to this student now with this setting, and I, again, may not be applicable necessarily in a 1st grade or 2nd grade scenario, but as students are able to check their Gmail that's connected to their Google account, I can send a receipt, and that kid can say, look, you said I didn't turn it in. I've got an email that says I did, and I did it at this time. Right. I'll take it. So then you've got of course, your settings. Do I want this to be a limit of 1 response? Meaning, do you want them to be able to do this over and over again? Yes or no? And then do you want them to be able to edit after they submit? Do you want them to be able to see summaries, charts, and text responses? So this is all about how you've designed this form. Is it a enrichment? Is it an assessment? Is it a quiz? How do you view this? And then you're going to adjust those settings accordingly. The presentation tab is where what Nadine was talking about there. I can turn on show progress bar. And again, that helps. I did an entire AP English final exam in a Google form. And you better believe on a block schedule, for 88 minutes of a final exam, roughly, those kids had a progress bar and sections, because I felt like they needed to know how they were progressing with that large sort of exam. Of course, you can shuffle order. And then in the case, again, if I'm talking about a final exam, yeah, you're not doing another response. It's a one and done. And another thing, talking about personalizing the learning, it's not tough to go ahead and change that confirmation message.
Yeah.
You can put whatever you want there. So in my final exam, it was, a little message from me to those seniors who got to literally turn in their final exam and walk out of my room. So I was able to have a message there that was sort of general to that group of kids. But there's some great settings there. And then, of course, quizzes. That's where I was able to establish the correct answers to some of those questions. That's the other thing. Guys, if you set it up as a quiz, it's grading for you. Not everything, but anything that you've deliberately marked as such can be automatically graded. And that is a time saver for you. Certainly, if you have short answers or paragraphs, you're probably going to need to go back and check those and assess them and give them feedback as you wish. But you can save a good chunk of time here. And again, you've got options on when those things release to students and what they see. And again, that all depends on how you're implementing the tool. Is it an assessment? Is it a quiz? Is it an enrichment? Is it just kind of a homework assignment? Is it just a flipped lesson where you're giving them content, doing a little bit of check for understanding, but ultimately not a grade? If that's the case, then maybe you can make those adjustments here.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to wrap things up. I can't thank Marcus enough for doing this. And, I mentioned to him before we got started, I was like, yeah, I know I can do a training on Google Forms, but I know how it is. It's nice to hear from other folks do it as well, because my teachers could hear me speak all the time. So that's why I love having guests on here. So I appreciate you taking the time to go ahead and do this little training for us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. And if you guys have any questions, I know I'm going to end the live broadcast here in a moment, but if you guys have any other questions, I know that I can get in touch with Marcus. He's also got his Twitter handle on there, so you guys can follow him on Twitter, and I know he'd be happy to reach out too.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.